So this is what we're making, a dainty embossed ring. First thing you do, always get your ring size. You can use an existing ring or a ring sizer, and then you need inside measurement using this part of your calipers. Wiggle it around so that you get a nice clear reading. Mine is 18.76, and because this is going to be quick, we're just going to use 1.2 millimeter round wire. Now, you could take your inside diameter, add this thickness, multiply by 3.14, cut your wire to that length. What I'm going to do is just treat this like a jump ring and see how I come out. So I'm going to file this end flat, and you can see I'm just holding it in my fingers. And then I'm going to go on my ring mandrel and start a couple of sizes smaller than what I want, and then I'm just going to wrap it tightly around this, and the end that you filed, you'll need to tap down because it won't want to curve. So just use your rawhide hammer, tap that end down. Try to get this as round as possible. Slide it down to your size. So that is my size. And then we're just going to saw that where it crosses over. Check that the end is flat. If it is, you can just bring the ends together and solder it. Now we want this to be really perfect because we want that to disappear when we solder. So any doubt, put it against your bench peg, file it, make sure it's nice and flat. Lovely, I can live with that. So get the ends lined up as perfectly as you can. The other way is to do your measuring, and we file the end flat. Swiss number 2 cut hand file. Measure it. And my diameter plus the thickness times pi is 62.67. So 62.7. And we'll saw. Now for me, the easy way is to set my calipers. So that's 62.8. Gives me 1/10 of a millimeter, so I just put that on the end of my wire. Drag it across. I have a little mark that I can see right there. We're going to saw. And file the end flat. And it shouldn't take much to make it flat. And I just hold it in my fingers. Both ends. And because it's so small, it won't take much effort to get what you want. Now we're just going to do the same old story where we take our flat half round pliers, form this into an oval, and we just want the ends to touch perfectly. We don't care what shape it's in, really, as long as the ends touch. Because after we solder it, we're going to go on our ring mandrel and round it up. So I just put the rings flat on my charcoal block. And mix up your flux. It's a little bit dry. If you have to add water, distilled water, and just enough that you can make it creamy. You don't want it super liquid. Lovely. Now, just a touch where the join is. And you could pick solder these. You put them in your third hand. Hold it just like you would a jump ring. Or you can put your solder down here. Now, a small piece of solder per, and these are about 1.5 millimeters long. So neutral flame. And then heat your solder pick until it's red. Keep it red. Touch the solder. It'll jump into a ball. Heat the join. Put the solder in place, and the solder will flow. Now, if you're down here on the charcoal block, you can do the same thing. Lovely. And now we're going to quench and pickle. So quench in water, and we're pickling in sodium bisulfate. Pickle safe. And then we'll round them up and sand them back. While I'm waiting for the rings to pickle, I have a piece of 0.5 thick sterling that I've rolled through the rolling mill with a skeleton leaf, so I have a pattern on it. Now this ring is going to be a dainty little ring, so we're going to use just a small circle. Pattern down. And you look down through the hole to make sure that you have the metal completely covering the hole. Put an equal piece of metal opposite where you're cutting before you tighten your disc cutter down, and that way it keeps it level. Now with the pattern down, we didn't destroy the pattern, so now we have our little disc with its pattern on it, and that part's done. So take your cutter out the bottom, undo your metal, and we're ready to go back to the other bench. So take your rings out of the pickle, rinse them off, and the one that we treated like a jump ring is fairly round, and the one that we treated like a ring isn't, but it doesn't matter. We're going on our ring mandrel, and just push it down. Use your rawhide hammer to round it up. Do the other one. These are dainty little rings, and I would just make a batch of them all in one go. So now we have our rings around, but you can see that it's kind of potato chip shape. So what I do is I just use 2 steel blocks, and I put this between them, and then give it a nice little smack with the hammer. Flip it over. Done. Now it's still slightly irregular, this one, so we'll go back on the ring mandrel. Now be fairly gentle when you do this, and you might even use a piece of wood to hammer against it so that you don't flatten the ring. We want to take the curve out of it, but we don't actually want to change the profile of the metal. So now, a little judicious use of your sanding stick. So once again, it's not fragile, but it's small enough that it's easily damaged. So what we're going to do is just hold it in our fingers, sand the solder joint, and you want the profile to match the rest of the wires, so don't take too much metal off. So that's the outside, and then we'll do the inside with a split mandrel on our little Fordham pendant drill. So the difficult part, one of the difficult parts, is getting the correct amount of solder. Too much and you have a really big bump that you have to try to tidy up. Too little and you'll have a gap that you can see. So it just takes practice. Now we're going to solder this to our little disc. And what we want is a small flat spot, and we want that small flat spot opposite our solder joint. So we're not going to solder the joint to the ring. We're going to turn that up and solder the plain part of the ring. So just hold this vertically on your bench peg, and it doesn't need to be big, but it needs to be flat. And that's so you can have a decent solder joint. So I'm putting the embossed side of the disc down, and I'm looking at where my flat spot is. Now the easy way is to put a texture mark, or a Sharpie, whatever you call it, permanent marker, just up on the inside so that you don't have to look so hard on the outside to see the mark. You look on the inside and you know that that spot is your flat spot. So it just makes it easier to line up. So now we're going to hold this in our third hand. And this, your block needs to be flat so that you can figure out what is exactly straight up and down. Now, if you wear bifocals like I do, it's difficult to actually see what's straight up and down, so you can use a tri-square. Yeah, and I say I would have said it was the other way. So you just line that up, put your square next to it. You can see straight away whether it's straight up and down or not, because your block is flat and the back part of your square is flat. Lovely. So now, line this up and make sure that the two pieces are touching. And look this way, make sure that they're lined up properly. It's a little bit fiddly at this point, but all of your fiddling around here will just make it that much nicer when you're finished. So check, double check, make sure it's all perfect. And then a little bit of flux right where the two touch, both sides. And I'm using a 2 millimeter long piece of hard solder on this one because I want it to flow nicely on both sides. So just place it with your flux brush. Dry out your flux. And then I'm gently pushing down on my third hand with the solder pick, and I'll heat from the other side. So the solder is on this side, on my side, and I'm heating on the opposite side because I want to draw the solder through. And when it flows, we'll quench it. So I can see the solder there. We'll quench it, pickle it, and then have a really good look. I'm just going to tidy up the inside of the ring, the solder joint that I couldn't get with the outside sanding stick. So a split mandrel on my pendant drill. And once again, we don't want to change the profile. We just want this to look like it's a piece of round wire that's never had anything done to it. Don't overwork it. If you overwork it, you'll get to the point where it's smaller than it was originally, and you won't be able to fix it. You'll just have to start over. So always keep this moving, otherwise you'll sand little flat spots in. And now we're ready to polish. And because this has an embossed shape, we don't want to polish on our Tripoli wheel because it'll erase the shape. So after it comes out of the pickle, it'll just go in the tumbler for 10 minutes to an hour. Usually 10 minutes is plenty to make it shiny. Okay, we're out of the tumbler, and you'll notice that I tie a piece of wire on. Oftentimes when you're trying to find things in the tumbler, they like to hide, but if you have a piece of wire on, it's easier to locate it. So there it is, dainty embossed ring.